Hi.
Hello.
You made it. Awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, so we should probably talk about some stuff, right? Where's my phone gone? I had some notes. Should we start with a kind of general introduction? Who are you? What are you? Nice. No, branded note-taking things. That's
And
good.
some people made it for me, and I'm very grateful for that.
That's quite awesome. I wish they'd done that for my talk this morning. So, who are you? Where do you come from? What do you do? Why are you here? What's going on?
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of questions at once. So, where am I from? I'm from Switzerland, and I returned to Europe about 4 years ago. I used to live in South Africa for 10 years. And I work at Google in between search, but actually more on the Google Chrome, so the web platform side. And I focus mainly on user experience, so performance and everything that touches at user experience on the web in general. More specifically, CMSs. So for a little bit of context, just before I joined Google 5 years ago, Google really didn't invest much in CMSs in general, and rather invested in the web. And we raised a lot of awareness internally for CMSs, and then more and more teams got involved into WordPress, into Shopify, into multiple content management system. And so I'm leading most of these projects at Google. And mostly, like I said, from a user experience perspective.
Nice. I remember, so I've got a background in SEO and agencies and software spaces. And I remember when I just joined Yoast, I went to, was it WordCamp here? WordCamp Europe in maybe Serbia? And it was the first, so the SEO industry's relationship with Google has historically been either silent or antagonistic. So we're all used to it being a bit cat and mouse. And then I turned up at this WordCamp event, and there's a massive booth full of people from Google saying, we are working to help shape the web. And I remember there's a quote saying, we've historically been kind of working one website at a time to try and improve it and help them optimize. That seems silly. What happens if we go down a layer and we try and optimize the platform itself? And that really felt like an eye-opener moment. And suddenly, the whole relationship has changed. And yeah, you're leading this team that's working on the kind of the fundamental infrastructure. What's that look like?
Well, first of all, I think that's related to that. We call it the Google house at this WordCamp, because it was really looking like a house, and we realized afterwards that it was maybe just too big as a first booth. But yeah, I think at Google generally we have recognized that the web is not just built with vanilla HTML and JavaScript anymore, and frameworks, content management system power a big chunk of the web. And so the team at Google internally, we have some, at the moment now we have 4 WordPress core committers in my team, and then we also work with agencies, so we partner with agencies and extend this team. So that's a combination between Googlers and many other people in the community.
That's interesting. The enlightened open source side of my brain says that sounds really wonderful, like some great resources, some phenomenal development. The tinfoil hat SEO side of me says, should I be concerned that Google has subverted, like quietly and invisibly, the operating system of all the websites we're building? Should we be concerned about that? What is the agenda? What's the strategy?
Well, I think that, first of all, why do we invest into CMSs and frameworks in general is the goal for Google is to have a thriving web, right? So great user experience, people to succeed on the web is really important. And so, we're not trying to push a specific agenda. We're trying to make the web better overall. And of course, Google is not a charity company, right? Google makes money from the web, like many of you, like pretty much everyone who is involved on the web. And so it should be a common goal together to make the web better. And so sometimes it may be, pushing for Google features that we believe is important for the web, and sometimes it may be pushing other things. But, like I said, we're not just working on open source platforms to push Google agenda, essentially.
And how much of this, looking at it from the outside, how much of this is fighting back against walled gardens like Facebook and Instagram, the same thing, Facebook and TikTok and Twitter, etc.?
I don't know if we should necessarily see it as a fight. I think that each platform provides value to the end user, essentially. And the web has a lot to offer, but I believe that the web has a lot more to offer, and there's still a lot of opportunities to make it better. And so, sure, some people, and especially, the younger generation, we can see a shift to native platform and stuff like this, but there are some exciting new tools that's making the web more capable to essentially catch up and provide such great user experience as well.
Such as?
Such as many. Well, like, for example, WebAssembly, I don't know, obviously, you were, I know, actually, you may have watched Google I/O yesterday. So, I think, as Matt, one of my colleagues said, it shouldn't be the web or a native web or native app. It should be and, right? So working together. And so, projects like WebAssembly makes it really easy to, execute or port code from C++, native app to the web. And so, I think this is kind of closing the gap and really, making the web more powerful.
I guess in the other direction, you've also got the kind of progressive web app ecosystem, which, were you involved in that in the WordPress? Yeah, that was really interesting, right?
Yeah, the plugins still exist.
Oh, yeah.
So I think this is still alive, and, there are still good use for that. And so we should keep growing this project.
Cool. So what else are you working on? What have you done? What's in the pipeline? What's the mission? I've been involved across many projects, from, like I said, performance, also mainly in WordPress, but Sidekit, and this is much closer to search. So, making sure that the product like Google Analytics, Search Console, and stuff like this works nicely in WordPress, and ultimately really helping WordPress site owners to succeed on the web. Would you a show of hands? Who's running Sidekit on their WordPress site? Not many. Interesting. Certainly all the Yoast nerds. Excellent. So maybe a bit
who's using WordPress?
Yeah, who's on WordPress but not running Sidekit? And put your hands down. I'll keep your hands up if that's because you've not heard of it and don't know what it is. Cool. Okay, so let's start there. Tell us about Sidekit.
Okay. Wow. Sidekit.
I know what it is.
I'm going to try to keep it short. So
no, you've got loads of time.
Sidekit brings Google services directly into WordPress. So, like I mentioned earlier, Search Console, Google Analytics, AdSense,
PageSpeed
Insight, Optimize, which is going to go away.
Yeah, if you could fix that as well.
Yeah. So, the goal is like, for some site owners, it's pretty complicated to actually connect their websites, verify on Google and all this stuff. So Sidekit essentially does that seamlessly. And then there's a nice dashboard within WordPress that's, reports on the main key metrics from Search Console and Google Analytics and so forth. And the interesting thing is to actually combine all these services, right? So this could be a path to the future for Sidekit is, okay, like, if I have more clicks, how much does it actually boost my ad revenues? Or if I do better from a performance perspective, how much more money do I make?
Yeah, that's really cool.
Combining this data is actually super interesting.
I think that's really interesting for, I guess, a few reasons. One is, that it brings all of those things together in a way where they've been 8 different platforms historically, and then you need an agency or a team to go and analyze it, whereas having those tell a connected story in the dashboard, super powerful. I think also there was a really interesting thing I think you did relatively recently where if you try and connect to, say, Google Search Console and you don't already have an account, you create one automatically. So like super frictionless, really cool.
It takes care of like all the things that needs to be done, essentially, from site verification to creating Search Console property to placing the tag in the front end for Google Analytics, from now migrating to Google classic Google Analytics or universal Google Analytics to GA4. So all this kind of things.
I'm glad that GA4 is giving you a headache as well. That's very reassuring.
Yes. It is.
What was I going to say then? I think the other thing that's interesting about that is Miriam was talking earlier about some of the positioning and marketing challenges that WordPress has versus, say, a Wix. And one of the things those platforms do very well is a nice dashboard with, here's how my site is doing. And WordPress just fundamentally doesn't have that. And you need 8 different plugins to pull in all the bits. It feels like Google providing that is such a powerful move. Nice.
Yeah, I think it is important, and for WordPress specifically, because WordPress is just open source distributed software in comparison to proprietary services, and especially SaaS services, connecting to APIs in general is not possible with core. So plugins, are just the way to go, and Scikit aims at solving that for Google services.
Nice. So you mentioned, I guess, the kind of quality gap of the web and what the web could be. What are some of the big things that are going to fill that gap?
Quality in terms,
whether that's performance or capabilities, or what's the...
So we spoke about capabilities. I think, improving the web experience overall through new capabilities or existing capabilities is key. And then user experience in general relies on performance. And so, very often I am on Discover, on my Google Discover. I browse through the thumbnails, and then when I click on it, the experience is awful. There is no other words. Like, things popping up from everywhere. The content I'm actually trying to read is just shifting and stuff like this. And we can see in comparison to other platforms that this is really not a good experience. And it's a huge challenge to actually solve this. And so, programs like Core Web Vitals, amongst many others, really aim at solving this. And this is key for the future, from my perspective, for the web to continue striving.
You think performance is like the biggest gap there? Yeah, interesting. I guess we can't get away without talking about AMP. I know Barry will be very... Where's Barry? You have a...
Wait.
Cool.
You didn't...
Is that not... not so...
You didn't warn me about this thing.
So we should touch on it at least, I guess. So where do we start? I guess... At the graveyard, yeah. Is AMP dead? Has it officially failed now? Because I would like to update my Twitter bio if so.
Yes. Many people would want me to say yes. And
yeah. I would love you to say no. I would love you to say that we're working on it and we're trying again and we've got a great plan and a vision, but it feels like...
Well, I can share a little bit of perspective, and my view is, going back to what I was saying, Google really trying to provide tooling and helping improving the user experience on the web. AMP is an attempt at that, right? Provide the right guardrails, provide a framework that essentially makes it in a forceful way, in a way, but in a good way, provide good user experience by default. And in many ways, I think that this has been successful. Besides all the politics and drama about how, the cache, and all this stuff, the goal behind this framework, the original goal, is to improve user experience. And so I think this paved the path and was a stepping stone to Core Web Vitals, for example.
Yeah. Independently
of all the politics, it raised a lot of awareness about, speed, about performance. And when we speak about performance, is also content shifting and stuff like this. Is not only speed. And so I think that, from that perspective, it had a positive impact. Now, where to from now? I think that, of course, with AMP, there was the search ranking implication and stuff like this, which now has moved to CWV. And so AMP, I think, continues to be a good framework to achieve good Core Web Vitals and user experience. And this is the current state of AMP. Is it going away? No, there's no announcement of it going away. But, we could see that there was a shift from, for example, in search results that now, is no longer a requirement to be AMP compatible.
Nice, thank you.
Sorry for the disappointment.
No, that's fine. So I think one of the interesting things that happened, a few years ago now, was it felt like WordPress woke up and realized that it was really freaking slow. And at the same time, Shopify and Wix and Squarespace and various others were putting time and money and people on speeding them up. I guess it was when Core Web Vitals became a kind of mature thing, right? Which, thanks, AMP. And we started to really see some tangible metrics about how bad the situation was. what happened next?
Yeah, I actually remember us having this conversation, when Yoast and Google proposed to have the performance team for WordPress. And yes, it is. And, I think there are multiple reasons why this happened. First of all, when you have a SaaS service like Shopify and stuff like this, it is much easier to act quickly and improve across the board, right? Wix and other SaaS services.
Yeah.
For an ecosystem like WordPress is much harder, right? There are thousands of plugins, and so it's a really difficult challenge. And so I think this is where, Yoast, Google, and others partners to create this WordPress performance team to try to address some part of it. So I think that there are three parts, right? WordPress core. At the core platform level, it's a pretty old code base. There are a lot of improvements to be done there. Then there is the ecosystem, right? Like, what do we do with all these extensions, the plugins, and the themes? And I think, starting with working with some of the most influential plugins, maybe, Yoast and other popular plugins to make sure that they do have good user experience and performance. And then comes the third pillar, which is developer tooling. And that's really about enabling developers, plugins developers, to have performance as part of their workflow. Whether it's like from the sniffer, having the right tooling, like we are working on a plugin checker, so that people can easily run their code and get performance warnings or errors or advice. So these are kind of like the three main pillars. And then, when developers have the right tooling and core has been improved, at last, I think that we can help site owners making the right decisions.
So a bit of a long chain of actions.
But we need to first give a chance to developers and the right tools to fix their products, right? And then finally, we can maybe start surfacing this problem to the site owners who are eventually installing these extensions. And this is where the biggest problem is. As a site owner, if you're not really technical, you don't know which plugin to choose.
You have no idea that contact form will slow down your site. And that
exactly. You are after features. And so you install plugins because it provides features. But you don't know how costly this plugin is going to be to your website. At that times, oh my God, so sometimes sites with a lot of plugins, and then the site owner is in trouble, and because of poor performance, they're not achieving the goal, they're not succeeding on the web, they're frustrated, and they go post on TikTok.
Makes sense. You mentioned the performance team. For the benefit of people who aren't aware, do you want to talk about a bit about the structure, what's being worked on, what the roadmap looks like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, the open performance team, and then of course at Google we also work especially with partners, but it's a core WordPress team made of many contributors. Google sponsor a few contributors amongst other companies, Yoast and XWP and many others, and really trying to improve WordPress core platform by bringing new APIs. For example, the script loading strategy API, really helping developers to easily defer the script, for example, to fixing or improving performance by default, like we saw with lazy loading and what's coming, fetch priority, for example.
Fetch priority is cool.
So yeah, that's kind of like the core performance team. And then also, representing performance during the major release. Now there's a core performance release lead for every release, and visualize. Oh, I will get it. Speaking about performance at events and stuff like this.
That's cool. That wasn't without politics, though, right? I think the performance team still feels like it's contentious.
Well, is anything in WordPress without politics?
Yeah, but that's been costly, right? So there was challenges with the Performance Labs plugin and whether that should be one thing or 20 things, and then all the mess around WebP where Matt wades in and says, "Oh, I don't actually like this," and then now what? Do we have clarity on how that relationship works yet, or do we just if this is the most broken part of WordPress and we're throwing our best people at it, and Matt is going to wade in and say, "Oh, I don't like WebP," how do we manage that?
Yeah, it's difficult, and I have some thoughts about that. But also, I want to recognize maybe something that we didn't do well is that we started with the performance team, and we analyzed what are the biggest gap in WordPress and what we should work on first. And we based on our metrics, we found that image in general is a problem, and we really need to optimize images. And it turns out that there's WebP, which is one of the formats that is by Google or heavily pushed by Google, which has the best cross-browser support. And other than that, AVIF is also a great format, but is not widely adopted. And so that was one of the first features that we worked on as the performance team. And of course, Google being one of the founder of the initiative, and that being a Google feature, it has been not received very well, and for good reasons. And I think it's okay that the community want to push back on something, and we are working with the community, and we listen to that. Now, the way it was done, it's different, right? And I think this is a fundamental problem in WordPress, is that there is no process to a feature, right? Yep. It's like kind of random proposal on WordPress make, and then some sort of maybe opinions from people. It goes into development, and then at the last minute, there are some decision makers who can say no. And so this happened for WebP, and I think that overall this is something that needs to be improved in WordPress, is that we need to have better processes to what is acceptable, or at least will be accepted before it goes into development, right? And so I had multiple conversations with multiple people, including Josefa, on how we can improve this overall, and hopefully in the future we don't get into this kind of situation where months are spent on working on something which is essentially shut down at the last minute.
Yeah, that's not fun. No. I wonder if the opposite approach might be quite interesting, where we just if the fear and the concerns are Google is strong-arming something that Google wants for Google's benefit in, we could double down on that, and we could say, hey, Google and Yoast and Elementor, etc., are all agreed that this thing is important, and between that and however many other big brands and respected people, maybe we could just shape WordPress for the better, greater good. Barry would love that. That's good. We'll just impose good behavior on everyone. Is that a route we might take?
I don't think so, because it is a way, but I generally believe that it's not the right way. I think because the strength of WordPress is also the community, and the large use base, and so having a bunch of people, even if we know or think that this is the right thing to do, just enforcing things is not the right way. But I do think that we need to have strong opinions and help demonstrating why, with metrics and stuff like this, why this is a path forward that we should all take, but enforcing is not a way to go from my perspective.
Metrics are interesting. It does feel like we have a challenge where we're trying to improve the performance, but to do that, we need to spend a whole bunch of resource measuring it first, and that has performance problems, and the performance of the teams itself, yada, yada. There's a huge amount of energy going into all of that at the moment. Let's assume we can fast forward, and what it says is everything is very slow, the database is a nightmare, images are bad. What happens next? What do we build? What do we prioritize? Is it AMP version 2? Is it WebP?
No, I don't think so. I think that there's still a lot of opportunities. There are some more kind of very opinionated things that we could work on, like redo the whole code base, but this is not feasible. Do you know about this Bootstrap project?
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I mean, but there's still a lot to do, I think, with the current code base, and we are also seeing some exciting projects, like, for example, the running WordPress in the browser, which is not necessarily performance related, but we could also see, that suddenly we have a path forward to something completely new. And an interesting thing also is all the kind of headless stuff that's happening. And I think that this is a way to kind of start from scratch in a way, because obviously with modern frameworks and things like this, it doesn't rely on WordPress to actually render the content, and so this can be a path forward.
You mentioned, zoom out a second, you mentioned Chromium kind of level stuff as well. So there's obviously a lot of effort on WordPress. What's happening in the kind of browser ecosystem level?
Yeah, so well, many things, but an interesting thing is when we, brainstorm, at least internally at Google, like how do we make sure that, WordPress sites are passing CWV or generally offering a better user experience, we immediately think like, okay, let's improve WordPress. But, if we turn this around,
change the browser instead.
yeah, exactly, and think like, well, if the browser could understand that is a WordPress site and based on that make improvements,
oh wow,
because it is a WordPress site on things that we know, for example, I'm giving an example, but just deferring scripts that we know is not going to be a problem. This is not necessarily feasible, but for the sake of the example, Chrome or other browsers detect as a WordPress site, they know that, whatever script doesn't need to be there and make improvements on behalf of on that.
That's fascinating for a few reasons, I think. One is everything that we see in how we think Google crawls and consumes and processes the web, the bits of it that look like they don't make sense, there are so many scenarios where we go, that's a WordPress site, that's jQuery, why aren't there more heuristics? And the perception I think a lot of us have is there is a pressure just to have a black box and that any kind of manual rules and tweaks are not the preferred approach. But then at a browser level, if we start to say, okay, now we have detection and different behaviors, that opens up a fascinating kind of worms, I see. Is there a risk to that? Do you end up, again, kind of artificially dictating and shaping the web? Or where do you draw the line?
Yeah, I mean, this is just really early brainstorming. So,
I love it.
It's really at the state of being an idea. But the point is just that recognizing that the web is built, or big chunk of the web is built with what we call abstraction layers. So that is libraries, frameworks, CMSs. If browsers can have context and detect that, I think there's a lot more than browsers can do, right? And of course there's a risk, because nobody has, authorized browser to change that. But we could see, for example, with BF Cache, that it has brought huge improvement on performance on the web at zero risk, right? Or almost zero risk. So yeah, we're exploring this territory, but we'll see.
BF Cache broke a whole bunch of people's analytics.
Yes,
so
true. That's why I said almost.
Yeah, so when you navigate backwards and forwards between web pages, if you've configured the relationship between the browser and the website and the code is set up in such a sensible way, the browser can be smart enough not to have to load the page again, but just take you back to the state you're in. But then any tracking setup you have, which was anticipating that being a page view, unless you've configured it, doesn't fire. And a whole bunch of small other side effects. But yeah, the performance gain is phenomenal, but then, some potential weird numbers. Interesting. Yeah, so this is a complex ecosystem and tweaking bits over here. Yeah, okay, cool. You mentioned that you had, sorry, I'm just thinking out loud. You mentioned you had a bunch of secret stuff that you're definitely not allowed to tell us anything about, and therefore definitely won't.
Yeah, well, they were secret until yesterday, so.
Oh, yeah.
Now I'm
allowed. I don't think anyone here has had a chance to catch up on I.O. yet, because it was like 7 p.m. local time, so we've skimmed some news, but I don't think anyone's seen many of the details.
Yeah, so now they're not secret, which is good in a sense, because you can learn more about it. But yeah, there's been a lot of announcement, a lot of exciting stuff for the web and across Google, obviously, but I think for us on the web, the web should be kind of the focus. And I would say two top picks for me is, one is, I don't know how many developers are in the room, but when I'm sure that many of you built something and then realized like, oh, it doesn't work in IE6, who is not traumatized about IE6?
Who was alive when IE6 was something, okay, yeah.
So yeah, choosing what to use is really difficult. And so starting yesterday, we announced a project called Baseline. And essentially, it's really about helping developers or site owners making decisions on which web capability or web feature to use.
Can you tell people not to use React? That would be so good.
Yeah, it's open source. You can make suggestions. And so,
okay.
And so yeah, I think this is a huge deal, and it's already rolled out on MDN, so Mozilla documentation.
Oh, nice.
So now you'll see on top, like for a given feature, like grid, whatever is like, hey, baseline supported across
It's
main
like can I
browsers.
use, but kind of more official.
Exactly, and
Love it.
we hope that is going to become a standard. Like you say, like, okay, my site is baseline compliant, and so. And there's going to be new features added all the time, and every year there's going to be a new baseline, essentially. So baseline 2023, 2024, and so forth.
And you might deprecate older stuff. You might go, you're using technology.
Exactly.
You probably So you kind of keep people up to date on.
Yeah, it's a forever living thing. So
that's fun.
So for all evergreen browsers, I think this is really. It's for all evergreen browsers, and this is really useful for developers.
I see quite a common performance overhead on WordPress sites where they're still supporting HTML5 shims and other stuff, which, they needed 15 years ago, but they don't really need to. So all of that sort of stuff, you can start to red flag it and say, you can kill this off now. Yeah,
and vice versa, right? Exciting features that people may want to use, and then it's not part of the baseline yet, or, on a related project is Interop. I don't know if many people are familiar with that, but this is really trying to work, across browsers on new capabilities for the web and try to have them ship, together across browsers.
The CSS color spaces thing, I think, was one of the things.
Yes, I think it was one of the things. Yeah. But every year, people can nominate features essentially to be supported across browsers, and so this is, another effort that I think is really important for everyone building for the web. And baseline is a new one, so that's an interesting thing. I encourage you to watch the developer keynote of I/O, and Matt Dowell is speaking about that. And then another one is INP. So I don't know how familiar the room is with Core Web Vitals, but Core Web Vitals is aiming to, let's say, measure user experience on the web with some metrics. And INP, interaction to next paint, is a new metric that now is pending. And so for search ranking in general, these metrics are taken in consideration. And so I think for this audience, it's important to know that INP is going to replace FID. Now it's in pending state, but it will roll out in March 2024. And so everyone should start getting this site ready. In the simplest term, what is INP, interaction to next paint, is trying to measure responsiveness of your website. So, once your page has loaded and, there is an action to be taken on your website, how long does actually the callbacks of this event take? And
that's subtly different to the previous stuff, right? All of it so far has been focused on the loading, and now it's done. And this is, now I've gone to click on a button and, oh, that was janky.
Yeah, there was FID, so first input delay, that was evaluating kind of like the first interaction. Now INP is for all interaction, right? So it's not enough anymore.
You haven't speeded up yet.
It's not enough anymore to just have the load page really quickly, but then when people click on the button, it's just a nightmare, right?
I think that's going to be huge. I know everybody had to react to Core Web Vitals, and they finally got there and they sorted out the basics. But now you're saying that monolithic JavaScript horrible website that now you really have to unpick it.
That's right.
Great. It's going to be so good for the web.
Someone mentioned, like, when you think you have learned everything, I think it was the previous talk, then Google saw something and you have to start over. Well, that's one of these things.
Nice. No, it's constantly evolving. So we're a little short on time. Is there anything that I should have asked you that I haven't?
No, I don't know. Like, maybe why SEO was...
Yeah, we should say something about it, like it's an SEO thing. Yeah. So
wait, what did I prepare that we didn't speak about?
So we
ways to
you mentioned Core Web
make a lot of money on the web. No, that's not problem.
I guess some SEO advice, kind of more generally from your perspective. What do you think is going to be increasingly important over the coming months and years? What should people be focusing on that maybe they're not doing enough of?
I'm going to give an old school answer, but just keep optimizing for the users. And I think this is the basic of SEO from my perspective. It's like SEO is not there just for the sake of SEO, right? It's there to help search engine making the right decisions on how to serve content, which is informative and pleasant to consume, essentially. And so, putting the user first. Don't bloat with features, pop-ups, and things like this, and just think about user experience and usually SEO does quite well.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's not rocket science, right? Nice. Cool. Okay, I think that's us on time. So I guess over to Taco for some Q&A. You're just going to stay there?
You can see everyone's
Just
last
okay,
question.
yeah. Okay, so yeah, let's do some questions. There's a gentleman back up here. Have we got a box? Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Nice.
So this is the time I remove my Google hat.
Yeah. We had a panel yesterday in the Yoast office where we had a tinfoil hat for any potentially contentious questions.
Hi.
Great. That's very reassuring. Thank you.
We're running a blog, and we now, since November, we got 15% of the users coming from the US, which is a German-speaking, with a German language blog. Could it be that the people in the US now use your translation tool more? Because 15%, it's a lot. It's 20,000 users from the US, German-speaking.
So previously you had mainly from Germany?
Mainly
Traffic from
Germany, Austria, Switzerland. But now
that's
suddenly it's the
interesting.
same amount like Austria.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
But you implemented the translation tool in Google Chrome in November, September?
Yeah, I mean, it could be related to that. So, yeah, I'm less familiar with the translation tool in general, but it could be related to that. Although for search traffic, you know, it's a little bit surprising. So
It's about the Mediterranean area, so
Yeah.
sure the US people are interested in. So
it's interesting, and it's a multilingual site.
no, it's only German. But okay, we translated now two blogs in English, but
I don't know.
I have a eye on it. Okay.
Sorry, I don't have an answer for you, but thanks for asking.
I'll interrupt with a thought and a question
Yeah,
of my
maybe
own on
ask
international
the
stuff.
SEO
Well, so,
people.
I don't know, but we can chat later and talk to an SEO. We'll explore because it might be a data issue as well. I had a thought which I should have asked you while we were chatting on Core Web Vitals. So Yoast.com is lightning fast, like really obnoxiously fast. We've put a lot of work, far more work than we should have into it. It is failing Core Web Vitals because we get a ton of traffic from India and developing countries with poor network infrastructure and older mobile phones. Sweeping generalization, but a lot of traffic from people on non-fast devices. We cannot, literally cannot, physically make it faster for those people, and we are now intentionally removing video and images from those pages for the audience in order to pass Core Web Vitals. We are degrading our user experience to tick the green box. I think if we're saying that everything should be faster and everything should be more internationalized and global, is the system robust enough to reward that, or is it like the fact that we're slow over there is going to penalize us over here? How do we deal with that?
That's an interesting
I'm just
question.
getting some free consultancy out of you while you're here.
Yeah, I knew I was going to get these kind of questions anyway. Yeah, maybe serve M pages for these people.
Yes! Thank you! Thank you! Excellent. Nice. Cool. Right. Question from the audience. There was a few else on the front.
Hi. I really like hearing you say, put the user first. How does Google themselves put that into practice? What do you do as a company to put the user first?
That's interesting. Well, I mean, Google had its core mission, right, to organize the world's information. I think anything that we build on the web is also around this, right? So really trying to provide the most accurate information is really a forever living mission. And then everything that comes around it, for example, user experience, is part of that, right? It's like, it's not enough to just have content delivered, is everything that happens after that, how they consume content and stuff like this, it's key, right? And so that's why we have so many teams trying to improve the web experience in general. So your question is quite broad in a sense, because everything that, you know, for example, at Chrome we build is putting the user first, essentially, serving content to the users the best way possible.
I'll get more specific. What do you do in terms of user research?
Oh, that's interesting. So On search, on Google Chrome, on WordPress product specific. Yeah, I don't know what's your question specifically. Again, it's really broad. But what I can tell you is that for every Google product, we actually do user research before, and so we sometimes it's difficult to. We think that we can make assumption like this is good for users, but actually it is not. And so we do a lot of research before, like UX research and stuff like this. And one other important piece is that, I don't know if you know, but we do quite a lot of things with data. And so, and so, we definitely make like data-driven decisions. And, again, politics aside, we most of our data, for example, for Core Web Vitals is open to everyone, and
the Crux data set.
Yeah, exactly.
Phenomenal.
And so we essentially make a lot of research and make product decision based on data.
Thank you.
Hands up, has anybody not seen the Crux data set or used it? No? Okay, so most people. So probably worth doing like 30 seconds or so on what is that and how can people go and look at it?
Yeah, sure. So essentially for Core Web Vitals, I hope now everyone understands Core Web Vitals, but the data are collected from Chrome and then preserving privacy. So basically, there needs to be a certain amount of traffic for every website. Then the user experience using Core Web Vitals is measured, and then this data are public. So anybody can go and query the Crux database for any website to find out what is the Core Web Vitals score, essentially. And so, yeah, that can be useful for whatever reason, whatever people want to know, whether it's to know how your competitors are doing or, whatever it is.
I think that's the competitor angle is really interesting because if we're saying that performance is a huge part of user experience and Core Web Vitals is being continually refined to do more of that and better understand it, this is now a dashboard that tells you how user-centric are your competitors, which is a wonderful metric to track over time.
Yeah, joke aside, I think that, metrics on its own are useful, but very often benchmark is key, right?
Yep.
And so, knowing that you're doing some metrics is useful, but knowing how you're doing in comparison to your direct competitors for your industry is a lot more useful.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, it's quite good to have dashboards like this.
For sure. Cool. Anyone questions somewhere, maybe? Over here, yes, excellent.
You have mentioned the core of WordPress, the plugin ecosystem, but one problem with the plugin ecosystem of WordPress is that the plugin review team has been always so overwhelmed. Basically, there has been Mika and Otto, and that's it. That plugin get reviewed only when they are published, but not when they are updated. So basically, you can get whatever you want into the plugin repository. Have you considered sponsoring people from the plugin review team now that they are accepting new contributors to being able to control the performance of the existing plugins?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think personally that it cannot be solved just by throwing more people at it, but we need better tooling. And so we're doing two things about this. The first one is the automated performance testing environment, which landed for WordPress core. So now for every WordPress commit, there is a testing environment that essentially runs a bunch of performance check, and then it's public on the dashboard. We'll keep on improving this, and we also plan to make it reusable for plugin developers. And then the other effort is a plugin checker. And the plugin checker, like the theme checker, runs a bunch of checks and performance checks included. And so one, I think that this should be used by the plugin review team. And also, I think that we should maybe use Tide or something else, but similarly to now, the testing environment running for every WordPress commit, actually, every plugin is on its own repository, actually one major repository, but we could be able to run this testing, these checks for every plugin,
and
not only for when they publish, but also when they push an update and stuff like this. And then either or first inform the developer about it, and then, like I said, at last maybe inform site owners and maybe put a score on it, which we saw with Tide was problematic. But this is I think a more scalable approach, is provide or having better system to solve this problem at scale. adding more people would be great. We need more, human. But really, to solve this problem on every update, it's not just throwing resources that's going to help.
Thank you. I think the idea of giving website owners more informed choice. So, like the evil version of this narrative is Google says you can't have that plugin because it's bad. But the nice one is some kind of traffic light system or scoring where you go, okay, you can have this, but as you said, it's going to come at a cost, and maybe that's fine. But maybe don't run 100 plugins that are going to come with a cost, and try and manage that a bit.
I mean, that's my dream, right? Like for site owners to be able to see, like, okay, this is going to be a plugin that is performing well or not. But there's a long road to that, like I said, and I think that we first need to give a chance to developers. And that's the next step, really. And then, at some point, I wish that we going to tell them, like, look, now you have all this information. In 6 months' time, there will be something either on the .org repository or somewhere available to site owners like, hey, your site is going to have a flag or some indication that is not performing well. Nice. But it would be really unfair to do that, from one day to another without them knowing how to fix it.
Nice. Okay, we're going to do one more question. If it's very fast, who has a lightning fast question?
No AI question. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's there. Shall we? Go on, Dixon. Synthesize us a generative question.
I'll phrase it in a way for you. Do you think it's a good user experience or a bad user experience to cite your sources?
To?
Cite your sources.
What do you mean by that?
So for a human being that's reading AI-generated output, do you think that the human being should be able to find the underlying sources?
Oh, yeah, okay, sorry. Yeah, absolutely. Is that a good answer?
Lightning fast,
No,
great,
yeah.
cool. All right.
No, I think, well, first of all, yes, absolutely. I think that there should be, I think that AI is transformative, right? And it's kind of weird to say like, hey, let's use AI to create content based on content.
Thank you.
And so, I think it should be tools who are helping us, but definitely for the reader or consumers, they should be aware like, hey, what is the source and where does this come from, right? I do think that, for one thing I wanted to say about AI, and that's why I was surprised there was not many AI questions, is what in terms of tooling and performance. And one thing that we have a lot today is tools to tell us how bad our websites are. But we don't have many tools to tell us how we should fix it contextually to our own website. And I think this is where there's maybe a good kind of AI territory, is really to try provide contextual, concrete action to take. Like, hey, do this and that on your website, not general guidance based on, AI trained models. So maybe, Raf thought we are exploring everything, but I think that will be helpful in the future.
There's bits of that already in Core Web Vitals and Lighthouse, right? It's not the AI side, but bits of like, okay, we've seen you on WordPress. You probably shouldn't be loading
stack
fonts.
packs.
Yeah. So a smarter version of that would be incredible.
Yeah, there are already stack packs, but there are general rules. They are not essentially, operating on the website
This
environment or contextual to the website.
Cool. That'd be nice. Awesome. Right. I think that's us. Thank you very much indeed. Awesome.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you, audience.
Thank you so much.
I didn't use it.
Thank you.